What's up, everybody? Welcome to Graceway Online. We are so glad that you are here today. Joining us on demand is awesome, but did you know that we go live every Sunday at 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time? Every Sunday, our online host team is available to chat and pray with you. To join us live, go to live.visitgraceway.org or catch us on Facebook.
Wonder if you have ever felt like in your Christian life or even in your prayer life, I'm not sure this is working. I think that maybe there's something that's missing. My prayers, they don't really feel powerful. I don't feel free. I see God doing it in other people, but when I look at my own life, this doesn't feel like how I thought it was going to feel. And times like 14 days in a row of prayer don't feel hopeful, they feel cumbersome. There's no anticipation, there's a little bit of intimidation. And there was a time in the Bible in Matthew Chapter 17 where something like this happened. If you have a Bible, why don't you get over there? If not, watch it on the screen. Let me read it to you. And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him, that being Jesus, and kneeling before him, he said, "Lord, would you have mercy on my son? For he has seizures and he suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they couldn't heal him." Jesus answered, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me." And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Jesus seemed to have an assumption of the power that was available to the disciples, but they couldn't really tap into it. There was something that was missing, and he gives two words to kind of give us a diagnosis around the reason that maybe we aren't experiencing everything that God has for us. The first is he says that it's a faithless generation. In other words, sometimes the thing that's missing is that I'm not connected enough to God. That I'm not really walking with him, that I'm not prioritizing him, that I'm not giving him what he's worthy of, that I'm not investing in my walk for whatever the reasons might be. The second, twisted, in some versions perverse, is that I'm too connected to the world. And so I'm not connected to God, but I'm over-connected to the world. And I'll be entirely honest with you, I think probably every few months I have to take stock in my own life. I'll be honest that at least 360 days out of the year, I get up and I spend time with God. But there are times that even in the routine, I'm not really connected to God. There's no love, there's no passion, there's no fresh wind, there's no joy to it. I'm just kind of doing it. And on the times that I'm not deeply connected to God, I don't know if this is how it works for you, I get over-connected to the world. I think that there's sometimes a gravitational pull to our walk with God, that it pulls me out of the presence of God, out of the joy of God, and into watching things I shouldn't watch, saying things I shouldn't say, going places I shouldn't go, listening to things that I have to every couple months keep coming back to it. But Jesus says the reason that you disciples didn't have the power that was available to you is that you were not connected to God and you were over-connected to the world. And the Bible goes on and it says the disciples come to Jesus privately. They're embarrassed and they say, "Why couldn't we cast it out? Why couldn't we have the victory over this demon that was afflicting this boy?" And he said to them, number 3, "Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like the grain of a mustard seed, you will say to the mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Jesus isn't necessarily making a quantitative statement. I think that sometimes in certain traditions we say, well, the reason God didn't give it to you is you didn't believe well enough. That's not the tone of what God's saying. God's saying if you really knew and believed and utilized the power that was available to you, you would have invested more into it. I think that if we really knew what prayer could do, I think we'd pray more. You think that's fair? I think that if we really believe that prayer and fasting for 14 days, that God could take something that's been in that spot for a long time and move it from here to there, I think that we'd show up every single night. I think that if you believed that God could take your marriage that has been here for so long, not exactly passionate, not exactly joyful, not exactly connected, and God in his grace and his power could move it from here to there, I think you'd show up every single night. I think that if you really believe that just by praying and putting a post-it note up on a board that hundreds and thousands of people are going to pray over, that God could take your kid who doesn't love Jesus and he could save him and transform him and move him from here to there, you'd show up every single night. I think that if your finances have been here for as long as you can remember and you're in debt up to your eyeballs, I think that if you've been in bondage, you've been depressed, you've been discouraged, if you really knew what prayer could do, move it from here to there, you would do it, but we don't, do we? We don't very often. And so in times whenever I'm struggling, whenever I'm a little bit disconnected, I kind of take inventory in my own life. And I say, God, am I walking close to you? Am I enjoying you? Am I loving you? Am I over-connected to the world? And am I believing that you can do incredible things? The seed that Jesus references, the grain of a mustard seed, is the smallest seed. It's just like a crack in the door. And I want to encourage you over the next 14 days. I know it's been here for a long time, but if you'll just crack the door just the slightest little bit, God will come straight through and do something miraculous. That's what he's saying. The thing that's missing is you're not connected, you're over-connected, you don't understand. And then number 4, Matthew 17, verse 21, he says, however, there are times you're connected, you're disconnected, you have faith. However, this area you're stuck, this doesn't go out except by prayer and fasting. Now, why those two things? Because prayer connects me to God uniquely. It connects me to God uniquely. Prayer isn't just a check the box. Prayer isn't a certain set of words. Prayer is just you spending time with God. It's you committing to just be in the presence of God. And how many of you know when I'm talking to God, God's talking back to me by his Spirit? And the more time that I spend with God, the more confidence I have in God. The more times that I've come to God and said, God, I'm stuck, or God, I'm broken, or God, I need, or God, I hope, and seeing God show up again and again and again and again, in the presence of God, I've grown in my faith for God. Prayer does that uniquely. And fasting uniquely disconnects me from the world. Prayer uniquely connects me to God. Fasting uniquely disconnects me from the world. And Jesus says there's certain things that you're stuck in, certain things that you're missing out on, that the only way that you can get them is if you commit yourself to prayer and to fasting. And so I want to teach you today what prayer and fasting looks like, because I think that most Christians, especially American Christians, we don't really understand, let alone practice fasting. I did kind of a casual survey, and I said, hey, when's the last time that you fasted? And most of the time it's been like, the last time you made us fast, right? Last that's like a year ago. And when's the last time before that? Well, never. Or the time before, like, we don't have this regular practice of fasting, and I'm afraid that there are some things that we're missing out on because we don't understand the power that's available, not just in prayer, but in prayer and fasting. And so I want to teach you for a little bit, and then I want to show you how simple it is to commit yourself to this process of fasting. So what is fasting? Fasting is in both the Old and New Testament. It is referenced over 50 times. And when it's referenced, it's not a special occasion. It's actually a very common occasion. And it's not something that's unique. It's something that's expected. It shows up again and again and again. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is talking about fasting. And he says, when you fast, and then he gives us kind of a playbook. But it's not if you fast. It's not that time back when you fast because Pastor Tim made you fast. It's when you fast. It's a regular occurrence, not just the super serious Christians do. Not just the pastors do, not just the missionaries do. This is a common understanding, a common centering practice that has occurred in the church for hundreds and hundreds of years. So what is fasting? Fasting is a voluntary and temporary abstaining from food or certain activities for a specific purpose. It's to choose, I'm not going to eat this, or I'm going to eat less of it. I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do it less often, so that I can bring focus and clarity to a certain thing for a specific amount of time. That's what fasting is. So I want to just kind of help our understanding of this. Why does God care what you eat? Why does God care what you eat? Why does God care if you're hungry? Why does God care if you kind of afflict yourself? Is God most happy when you're most uncomfortable? So let me say it to you this way. I think that there's an elephant in the room when it comes to fasting in the West, because the context of the American church is that we are almost always full. We're almost always full, not just in our stomachs, although most of us, it's been a minute since we missed a meal. Come on, somebody. But also in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls. We live in a context of abundance. And when you get so used to abundance, you start to call it blessing. And when you start to call it blessing, you develop theologies around it. So let me give you one that maybe you've heard. If God's happy with you, he's going to bless you more. And if God's not happy with you, he's going to bless you less. If you're obedient, God's going to give you more because the norm is full, so abundance must be extra special. And so we get certain churches that say the more you have, the more happy God is with you, and the less you have, God must not be as happy with you or must have less faith. Can I tell you that's not in the Bible? It's not in the Bible. That's not the thing that I need you to understand about this. But I will say that in abundance, when fullness is the norm, there are certain practices that fall outside of the natural circle of our experiences. Let me give you one. Suffering. Christians in the West, we don't really know where to put suffering. We don't really know where to put humility. We don't really know where to put doubt. We don't really know where to put patience. And we don't really know where to put fasting, because fasting feels like, why would I empty myself when I could be full? When I could be full. And so I want to correct our perspective around this. Fasting is not the suppression of any desires. Fasting is not, I really, really want it, but I'm not going to do it because it makes God happy when I'm miserable. Fasting is the expression of desires. Now, why is this important? Because some of us, our working theology is that God is most happy when I'm most miserable. Our working theology is if I want it, God's probably not going to give it to me. But that's not in the Bible. Fasting isn't an expression of that theology. Fasting is, I want you more than that. Fasting is, God, I want to hear from you so much that I'll stop eating, that I'll stop watching, that I'll stop going to, that I'll get off social media, that I'll cancel Netflix, that I won't eat breakfast. Why? Because I want to express to you, God, not that you're happy when I don't have it, but that I want you more than it. That I want you more than it. Secondly, fasting is not an act of willpower. And again, some of us, our theology is, God is most happy when I'm most miserable, and God is most happy when I'm the most constipated. Some of us, our experience with God is just try harder, and then God will be happy. Listen, God's already happy with you. God wanted you. God sent his son to the cross to have you, and you squeezing doesn't make God any happier. I think that sometimes he's like, what are you doing? Fasting isn't an act of willpower. Listen, it's a declaration, an invitation, an acknowledgement of weakness. When you fast and you skip meals, I'll tell you, you're probably going to get a headache. You're probably going to be a little grumpy. You're probably not going to feel as strong as you normally do. But what fasting does is it articulates to you what is really true. That if you could have done it, you would have. That if you were strong enough, it would be changed. That if you could have moved the mountain on your own, it would be moved. And so what fasting does is it expresses to you and to God, not I'm going to try harder. No, God, I don't have the strength to do it, so I'm going to ask you to do it. I'm going to ask you to do it. And this is where our culture gets really, well, why would you make yourself weaker? You got to make yourself louder and stronger and more full. And God says, no. I need you to empty yourself so that I can fill you up. The word fasting means to empty or to afflict. And God says, if you'll choose to empty yourself, I promise I'll fill you up. I promise I'll strengthen you. I'll promise you I'll do things for you and with you that you couldn't have done if it was up to you. And so personally then, fasting clears my focus. Okay, so how many know that I'm here and that God never moves? God never leaves. God never takes a nap. God never gets busy and goes off. God is always present in your life. But how many know that you put things in between you and God? I'm not talking about sin, although sometimes it's sin. I'm just talking about your calendar. I'm talking about Disney Plus, right? I'm talking about stress. And here's what fasting does. I'm gonna move those things so I can see God clearly. I'm gonna choose to think about my calendar differently, think about my diet differently, think about my time differently. Romans 12 and verse 2 says, hey, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed. How? Yeah, by changing how you think. So that you can discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So watch, for the next 14 days, there are some things that I'm gonna take them out of the equation so that I can both see, experience, and hear God differently than when all of those things are in place. And when I think about those things differently, I will be able to discern more clearly the will of God for my life regarding that. In other words, God's always speaking and always moving, but sometimes I'm not always focused. And so for 14 days, what are we saying? We're saying we're going to collectively and individually focus on God by removing some things out of our diet, out of our schedule, and out of our lives. Corporately, for Graceway, this season prioritizes God speaking and leading. Individually, it focuses you, but corporately, it prioritizes God speaking and leading. Listen to Isaiah 29, verse 13. The Lord said, this people, they draw near to me with their mouth, and they honor me with their lips, but their heart, it's far from me. And their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. This is the third, I'm going into the third full year as the lead pastor here at Graceway, and this is a concern of mine. I hope that every time you walk in this building and anyone is standing on this stage, they verbally point you to Jesus. That's what preaching is, right? Preaching, the job of the preacher is to teach you this is how incredible Jesus is, and this is how you get to him. And when you come to Graceway, over the last 2.5, 3 years, I hope that your experience has been, man, they talk about Jesus all the time. They talk about Jesus all the time. Pastor Brandon said to me that his little girl was watching the live stream for whatever reason, and she looks at him and she goes, all Pastor Tim talks about is Jesus. And I was like, yes, yeah. Here's the thing. In all the talking, our hearts can still be far from him. In all the talking about doesn't mean I experienced. Knowing about doesn't mean I enjoyed. And corporately, I will tell you, coming into a new year and into a new decade, I'm really asking God to lead out, to be ahead of us. Because how many know, sometimes even in church, when it looks good and the lights and the LED and all this kind of thing, we can be out ahead of God, and God's like, I'm just waiting for you to ask. And so every year, it's imperative, I'll just tell you as your pastor, for us to, the very first Sunday, say, God, you go first. God, you speak first. God, you lead out first, because I don't want to be a church that we're always talking about God but never listening to him. So let me teach you how to fast as practically as I can. So in the Bible, the commonality of fasting is spoken of so regularly that it's not necessarily a special thing. It's more of a routine. However, there are specific times that the Bible talks to us about a particular call to fasting. So let me just give you a couple. During a time of transition, in between King Saul and King David, in that transition, David called for a season of fasting. When Jesus is about to go into his public ministry, Matthew chapter 4, he doesn't just go off and start healing people and preaching the gospel. He goes into the wilderness and fasts for 40 days and 40 nights. And so maybe as we go into this 14 days, you're in a season of transition. You're getting out of a relationship. You're going into a new job. You just moved to the city. Great time to fast. Great time to fast. Secondly is if you're in a time of need. Esther Chapter 4, Esther's about to go in and talk to the king who has to extend the golden scepter for her to not be executed. And there's fear and there's worry, and she calls together the people of God, and she says, hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And so if you're in a season of need, whatever the need might be, it's a great time to fast, great time to focus on God. In times of considering the future, Acts 13, the early church, while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit spoke and said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work that I have called them to. This is a big one for me right now, for our church. God, over the next 10 years, where are you taking us? Over the next 10 years, where are we trusting you? Over the next 10 years, what are you going to do? And of course I can pray, and of course I can seek counsel, but I think that 10 years for a church our size with the legacy that we have, this is a season for me to pray and to fast as I try to seek God for this church. You got anything coming up in 2020 that you're like, I don't exactly know how to do that? In my marriage, in my family, in my finances, with my kids, with just who are you going to be in 2030? If you don't know, you should pray and fast. You should pray and fast. Around spiritual warfare, we saw this in Matthew 17. And I hope that you know that the devil is real. I hope you know he hates you. I hope that you know that he can't really get victory because Jesus accomplished that on the cross. But I hope that you know he'll try to wear you out in the meantime. Now, I'll be super honest with you. We got a thing. Anytime we're going into 14 days of prayer, even when we're doing 7, whatever God does, we just expect. So yesterday, I felt terrible for no reason. I felt like I got hit by a truck. I took 2 naps and went to bed super early and slept like a baby. You see this right here? This thing? I about knocked myself out on a cabinet last night. Cussed like a sailor. I'm just kidding. Not kidding. I was mad. I was super mad, right? Yeah, I told somebody I used to box a little bit, and I've never felt that close to getting knocked out as when I hit that. And then I was like, I'm going to have this stupid thing on my head tomorrow. 14 days of prayer. I got into my car this morning, and when it started, I was like, thank you, Lord Jesus. Listen. If you find yourself in a season of spiritual warfare around your marriage, around your kids, around your finances. And here's the thing. I hope that you do. I hope that you do. You guys, well, there's spiritual warfare around this church. I hope you know. You don't fill up a room this size and not have the enemy go, oh. We aren't going into 14 days of prayer. We're going into 14 days of war. We really are. And it's important for you to understand that in spiritual warfare, one of your greatest weapons is prayer and fasting. It's prayer and fasting. Grieving is another time in the Bible. I have a dear friend who just buried her dad. She's going through grieving. We have people who have lost sons and daughters and spouses. Grieving and fasting shows up in the Bible. Repentance and fasting shows up in the Bible. Some of y'all, you're like, I got to get out of 29 before I do another knucklehead thing. Hey, get into 2020 and recommit yourself to God and to holiness by prayer and fasting. Any type of significant event in a person's life, you see in the Bible connected to fasting. You see it in the Bible connected to fasting. And so how do we go about fasting? 4 types of fast. The first is a complete fast. It's only liquid. And so I'm going to be real practical with you. It's water. If you are thoroughly addicted to coffee, it's probably a cup of coffee in the morning, and it's some chicken broth at night. And that's it. And let me tell you why you would do that. This is a unique fast, but some of you, man, you've been stuck in that spot for so long. Why wouldn't you? Your marriage has been in that spot for so long. Your finances have been in that spot for so. You told me to not eat for 14 days. First of all, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm asking you to consider if there are certain things that can only go out through prayer and fasting. Is this the season for you to do a complete fast? A complete fast. Second is a partial fast. This is the most typical in the Bible. It's to skip, in our culture, to skip breakfast and lunch, and then after the sun goes down, you do dinner. And so here's how your calendar would look. You get up in the morning, you get ready, You go to work, no breakfast, you pray. No lunch, you pray. Come to prayer and then eat afterward. That's actually what I'm going to be doing. A partial fast. Selective fast. This shows up in the book of Daniel. Daniel doesn't take a complete fast, but he says, I'm not going to eat the king's meat or the king's wine. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to eat veggies, and I'm going to trust God through that. And so maybe because of health reasons or anything like that, you can't completely skip out, but you say, I'm not going to eat Doritos. And that's probably a good idea no matter what you're doing. Come on, somebody, all right? No, it's a selective. And then the fourth is what I'm going to call a soul fast. And I want to recommend this too if you're new to fasting or if you have significant health issues. This is not about food. This is about you taking something else out of your life. So I'm gonna get off social media. I'm not going to turn the TV on. I'm not going to do whatever I do to kind of knick-knack around. I'm not going to do that anymore because I want to create space to talk to God and let God talk to me. See, I don't do anything to knick-knack around. Ask your wife. I promise you do. Okay? But whatever it is, I'm not going to do that because I want to make space for God to speak. So in the next 14 days, a complete fast, a partial fast, a selective fast, or a soul fast. How do you then prepare to fast? This is as practical as I know how to make it. Number one, when it comes to a fast, have a purpose. It's on your worship, God. Have a purpose. As you go into this 14 days, are you asking God to give you spiritual renewal? Are you asking God to heal you? Are you asking God for direction? Are you asking God for reconciliation? Are you asking God for just special grace and covering over your life and year? But don't go into it with, I'll just figure it out as I go. No, today, before you come back, say, God, what are you going to call me to focus on? And for most of us, you already know. For most of us, you already know, man, it's my marriage. Man, it's my purpose. Man, it's bitterness. And I'm gonna address that with God in these next 14 days. So have a purpose for your fast. Number two is have a plan. Have a plan. So which fast are you going to do? Are you going to do a complete fast? No, I don't want to do that. Okay, you're going to do a selective fast. You're going to do a partial fast. Which fast are you going to do? I'm not going to do any fast. That's fine. There's no guilt around that. But I just want to tell you that Jesus said there's certain things that only happen through prayer and fasting. And I want to encourage you to not miss out on the blessing of God doing whatever he would have done if you gave him whatever you want to hang on to. Are you with me? And so which fast are you going to do? And then for how long are you going to do it? So I would encourage you to go to the full 14 days. But if you say, I've never done a fast and I think I can only do 2 days, awesome, do 2 days. No guilt, okay? There's no drama around this. Next is plan it into your schedule. So I'm going to fast take breakfast and lunch off. So then don't put any lunch plans on your calendar. Are you with me? And please God, don't be the person to go to lunch and be like, oh, sorry, I can't, I'm fasting. All right, don't be that person. Or at least if you are that person, don't tell me you come to Grace Way, all right? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, sort of. I'm not kidding at all. Don't do it, all right? Plan it into your schedule and then stick to it. Let me tell you how you're going to stick to it. You're going to tell somebody what you're doing. You're going to tell somebody. So I have people who know this is what Tim's doing. This is what he's not doing. This is how long he's doing it. This is the reason that he's doing it. And I've asked them to ask me whether or not I'm continuing to do it. Why? Because I know my weakness. Are you with me? Because I know come Tuesday, I'm going to be like, look at that donut. God won't mind. And it's true, he won't mind. He won't mind. But I don't want you to miss out on what God wants you to do. And so what I would encourage you to do is find a dear friend and say, what are we going to do together? Are you with me? Okay. Number three, I want you to prepare yourself spiritually. Can I tell you, if you go into a fast without preparation, you're going to get your butt kicked. You're going to get your butt kicked. And so I want you to do a couple things as we go into this season. Number one, who do you need to ask for forgiveness? And who do you need to forgive? Listen, fasting means I empty myself. And some of you, we talked about this last week, some of you have a space in your heart that you've devoted to a person or a memory. Don't go into a fast hanging on to that. Cut that loose so that you can receive whatever God wants to fill up in your life. Number 2 is I want you to consider what it looks like to humble yourself before God. Why? 2 Chronicles 7 and verse 14, if my people who are called by my name, he gives us 3 things, will humble themselves, will pray and seek my face, and will turn from their wicked ways. If you will humble yourself before God, if you will pray and seek God's face, focus, and turn from your wicked ways, here's what he promises. Then I will hear from heaven. Then I'll hear you. And I'll forgive your sin, and I'll heal your land. I'll heal your life. I'll heal your family. If you'll humble yourself. What do you mean humble myself before God? It means to say yes before he asks. That's what it means. It means to not go into this with clarifications about what you won't do. Coming into a season of prayer and fasting is saying, God, would you speak? God, I'll listen. And God, whatever you say, I'll do. You say, ooh, that makes me nervous. I know. I know. That's why it's important. But in the middle of it, I want you to meditate on the attributes of God. I want you to meditate on the goodness of God. I want you to meditate on the faithfulness of God. I want you to meditate on the kindness of God. I want you to meditate on the trustworthiness of God. Because you're going to get into this, and you're going to be experiencing weakness, and you're going to experience doubt, and the enemy's going to be whispering in your ear. And instead of looking at your past or at it or yourself, you need to look at Jesus. And then on a daily basis, meaning before you show up tonight, tomorrow morning, you get up and you say, God, I'm entirely dependent on you. God, I'm listening. God, would you speak? And God, would you give me the courage and the wisdom to obey? That's what spiritual preparation looks like. And then you show up here at 6:30 every night. Look, I know you're busy. And I'm not trying to be condescending to that. I'm busy too, but listen, you need this. You need this. And if you can't make all of them, make the ones that you can. But on a daily basis, God, what do I need to clean out? God, I humble myself before you. God, you're good. You're faithful. You're kind. I trust you. God, I give myself to you. I'm listening to your spirit. Would you show me who you are, what you've done, who I am, and how you're leading me? And then lastly, is I want you to expect results. I want you to expect results. This is what Jesus is talking about. Oh, you of little faith. I want you to expect God to speak. I want you to expect God to lead. I want you to expect God to give clarity. Here's why. Isaiah chapter 58, verses 1 and 2 and 5 through 9. I'm going to read it over you, and I want you to listen to it, okay? Don't miss this. God says, cry aloud and do not hold back. Whatever it is, put it on that wall. Whatever it is, write it out. Whatever it is, lift up your voice like a trumpet. You seek me daily and delight to know my ways. You ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Is such the fast that I choose? A day for a person to humble himself? Is it to bow down his head like a reed and to spread sackcloth and ash over him? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? God says, is that all there is to it? Just for you to go through that process? God says, listen to it. Is not this the fast that I choose? Let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to loose the bonds of wickedness. I'm going to undo the straps of the yoke and let the oppressed go free. I'm going to break every single yoke. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover him and not to hide yourself from your own flesh? Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing spring up speedily. Your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Here it is. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry, and he will say, here I am. Come on, you don't need someone to talk to you about God. You don't need to know facts about God. You don't need to work on your theology about God. You need God to say to you, here I am. I got you. I got you. I never lost you. I never gave up on you. I'm still with you. I still got plans for you. I forgive you. I restore you. I heal you. Listen, your Your world is going to look different because of the plans that I got for you. Here I am. There are things that God desperately wants to give you, and he's just waiting on you to ask. So I want you to take a couple minutes. Do whatever you have to do to get comfortable. And let me just lead you in a prayer here. The first is just to ask God in these next 14 days, God, would you speak to me? God, don't be silent. And God, don't speak to me in a way that's complicated or vague. Speak to me in a way that's simple and that I understand. And God, if I miss it the first 10 times, will you say it 10 more? God, don't let me miss what you have to say to me. Come on, ask God right now. God, would you speak to me? And then I want you to tell God, God, I'm listening. God, I believe that you're going to speak. I trust that you're going to speak. But God, I'm listening. God, I'm going to clear things out so that I can see you and so that I can hear you. Give me ears to hear. Give me eyes to see. Come on, tell him. God, we're listening to you. And then lastly, can you in faith and encourage say, God, when you speak and when I hear, the answer is yes. God, I need you to speak, and God, I'm listening, and God, I'm going to obey you. God, I hold nothing back. What you asked me for is yours. Where you're taking me, I'm going to follow. What you want to change.
We hope that you enjoyed the service. If you need prayer for any area of your life or just need someone to talk to, send us an email at amen@visitgraceway.org. If you live in the Kansas City area, we'd love to have you worship with us. You can let us know you're coming by going to visitgraceway.org, and we'll have a member of our dream team waiting for you to make your experience at Graceway great.